Welcome to Gangland Scotland EXPOSED. I'm Graham Mann, and this week we're talking about the downfall of one of Scotland's biggest crime gangs. Stephen Lyons, crime kingpin and head of the Lyons mob, was sensationally arrested in Indonesia last Saturday amid a stunning swoop on members of his organisation. The 45-year-old faces allegations of dirty money, running global narco routes and murder. And it brings to an end the 2 years he spent on the run from Spanish authorities who joined forces with Police Scotland to bring him in and blitz his criminal empire. The first pictures we saw of Lyons in years showed him surrounded by Indonesian police officers who'd been asked by authorities in Spain to make his arrest. He'd been made the subject of an Interpol red notice, which meant a red flag had gone up to authorities throughout the world to say, if he came up on your radar, he's to be arrested immediately. And that's exactly what happened. Images and video footage emerged of Lyons being led through the airport as he was taken away to a cell within Bali Airport. More incredible images emerged when he was brought out wearing an orange jumpsuit, a mask on his face and wrists bound in cable ties, as Indonesian police held a press conference to give the local media there an update on his status. It comes after we revealed how crime fighters accused him of masterminding hits in Madrid and Malaga in 2024. Lyons is also alleged to be the leader of a large-scale transnational criminal organisation engaged in drug trafficking and money laundering. Lyons is further accused of leading a crime ring that used shell companies for money laundering in Europe and the Middle East, including in Spain, Scotland, England, Dubai, Qatar, Bahrain and Turkey. Meanwhile, mystery continues to swirl around the whereabouts of two of his closest allies who fled moments before he was arrested after the trio touched down on the Lyons airport on a flight from Singapore. A manhunt is underway for convicted cocaine dealer Stephen Larwood from Kirkintilloch and Lewis Wark of Glasgow. Cops in Bali are reportedly watching all international crossing points but say their intelligence suggests they are still at large on the island. Immigration officials as well as regional cops are on high alert and actively hunting the duo. The sensational arrest of Lyons came just a day after a cross-border operation saw 13 Lyons clan suspects held in Scotland and Spain. The swoops were linked to an alleged plot to swamp Scotland with hundreds of kilos of cocaine. And in another blow, Lyons' wife Amanda was arrested by Dubai police in the UAE on Monday, with officers swooping on the luxury mansion where the couple had set up home after leaving Spain. Lyons has spent years orchestrating his gang, bringing them to the very top of the Scottish criminal underworld. One crucial dimension behind the Lyons' success was that he'd formed a strong alliance with the Irish Kinahan cartel. Stephen Lyons and Ross Monaghan in particular had managed to create a strong relationship with the Kinahans that would serve them well for many years. But a significant moment came along on March the 6th last year when a mystery figure was filmed throwing a firebomb through the window of a beauty salon in Edinburgh. It wasn't clear at the time, but it quickly became clear this was part of a revenge campaign ordered by a mystery figure based in Dubai. It subsequently emerged the man behind the attack, now identified as foot soldier Logan Carlin, was working on behalf of gang war instigator Ross Miami McGill as part of his bitter revenge plot after a drug deal went wrong. McGill, a former leader of the Rangers ultra group, the Union Bears, had been ripped off by associates of Edinburgh crime boss Mark Richardson and was hell-bent on revenge. This became the first in a wave of criminality that swept across Glasgow and Edinburgh, with members of the Daniel clan, arch enemies of the Lyons gang, in the firing line, along with associates of Richardson. The tactics employed by McGill included recruiting low-ranking foot soldiers as part of his Tamo Junto mob, who were willing to do his dirty work on the streets of Scotland, all while he was enjoying a life of luxury in Dubai. Meanwhile, Stephen Lyons, also living a lavish life in the UAE, watched on as his enemies suffered. During this time, Police Scotland launched Operation Portalage in an attempt to crack down on the violence. Slowly but surely they managed to make arrests, but the gang war continued with more businesses, properties and cars being targeted. The focus of attacks also switched from Edinburgh to Glasgow, which is where members of the Daniel clan became more in the firing line. The stakes were raised when one incident came to light that horrified even seasoned gangsters, when masked thugs burst into the home of an elderly lady and young boy who were associated with the Daniel family. They carried out a vicious assault on these vulnerable people. This upped the stakes, and the rumblings from the underworld was there would be more bloodshed in response to these horror attacks, which seemed to be coming every week. This campaign of terror amped up the police response, and they swept up dozens and dozens of suspects. The total, as we speak, is 63, with several already convicted and sentenced to many years in jail. Few people, however, would realise at the time just how bad things were going to get. This is where the story takes on an international dimension, when news came our way that two of the most powerful gangsters in Scotland had been targeted in a brutal murder in Spain. Ross Monaghan and Eddie Lyons Jr. had been shot dead by a lone gunman who burst into Monaghan's bar moments after they had finished watching the Champions League final on May the 31st last year. The two targets didn't stand a chance. Eddie Lyons died instantly when the gunman fired bullets into his chest. He then pursued Ross Monaghan into the bar, cornered him and fired a number of bullets into the notorious gangster, who died there and then. As the underworld looked on, everyone was sure this must have been the work of someone associated with the Daniel clan in response to all of the attacks they had endured during Scotland's gang war. But people were stunned to hear when Police Scotland said they had no evidence to suggest the murders were connected to the Daniel mob. There was more intrigue when, at a Spanish police press conference, detectives there made the opposite conclusion. Subsequently, a man called Mike O'Reilly from Liverpool was traced in England and arrested and extradited to Spain, where he remains awaiting trial for the two murders. Sources have told us that he has long-standing connections with the Scottish criminal underworld and is friendly to those who are part of the Daniel crime network. Not only did this double murder shock the criminal underworld in Scotland, it will have had the biggest impact on Stephen Lyons and relatives of the duo. It was a turning point as far as the gang war was concerned, and a turning point for the fortunes of the Lyons gang. He was devastated by these murders, and it must have been heartbreaking for him to know he wasn't able to come back to Scotland to lay his brother and best friend to rest. It was clear that the fortunes that had favoured Lyons for many years were starting to turn. In the wake of the murders, it wasn't long before more trouble was on the horizon, and in September, amid the raging gang war, Lyons was swept up along with Ross McGill and Stephen Larwood. They were arrested and thrown in a Dubai jail and subsequently told they had to leave the Gulf state. What happened after that remains something of a mystery. There have been reports of Lyons resurfacing in places like Qatar, Bahrain and Turkey, but it wasn't until this week that we finally discovered his whereabouts in the most dramatic and humiliating way. Now, as Lyons gets ready to spend his time in a Spanish jail, he will find himself in the same prison system as Mike O'Reilly, the man accused of executing his brother and his best friend. Sources say the assassinations ended the Lyons' grip on the drug trade in Scotland, with their head Stephen now at his lowest ebb and facing years languishing in a Spanish prison cell. It's a stunning turn of events that's happened within the space of a year. Stephen Lyons appeared to be untouchable at the very top of Scotland's criminal pyramid. Now he faces years behind bars. One image which perhaps encapsulates the fall of the Lyons gang more than any other is a photograph taken outside Glasgow Sheriff Court a number of years ago. There were four men in the picture: Ross Monaghan, Eddie Lyons Jr., Andrew Gallagher, and another high-ranking Lyons hood who can't be named for legal reasons. Ross Monaghan and Eddie Lyons Jr. were murdered in May last year. Andrew Gallagher passed away due to a drug-related incident in prison. The other man, who was one of the 13 who now finds himself facing serious criminal allegations. Meanwhile, the head of the gang, Stephen Lyons, is also in custody. His fate is unclear, but one thing is certain: the Lyons gang are at their lowest ebb. All these fast-moving, astonishing events have brought the Lyons gang to their knees. But one group will be looking on with some delight, and that's their enemies, members of the Daniel clan and others who have suffered at their hands over the years. They'll be looking on and hoping that this is a demise on such a scale that they will never recover. The future of the Lyons gang now seems incredibly bleak, with rivals within the underworld claiming this spells the end of their long-standing dominance of the Scottish underworld. The gang's criminal network has effectively crumbled, with many underworld speculators convinced they will never recover.